Hello everyone, it is Tuesday the 3rd of January 2023. Welcome back to the D3D4 football podcast dedicated to all things Leagues 1 and 2. I hope you've all had a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. We're at the end of the traditional festive period in League 1 and League 2, games packed into a very short period of time, and the purpose of this specific episode is to pick out our winners and losers from this festive period that's just gone on. We are looking at the games between Boxing Day and the 2nd of January, 3 matches in total for each team. I took the results of every team from over that period. I compiled them into a League 1 form table and a League 2 form table, and the four of us on this call have made our individual selections from there. Joining me today is David Jenkin, James Richards and Harry Thomas. David, how was your Christmas and New Year?
Yeah, do you know what, pal? Christmas and New Year was really lovely.
Excellent.
Barring the football results, it was a great time. But then again, this season has not been one for football results if you are a fan of the Gills. So,
good fun. James, how was your Christmas?
Good, thank you. Yeah, nice to see family, and it's always a nice time of year, I think, when you get the football coming thick and fast as well.
And Harry, you like me wishing it was still 2022 and not 2023.
If only, yeah. Can we stay in that glorious period from Boxing Day to the 29th?
That was nice. I like that period as well. I miss it. It was good. Yeah. A reminder before we get going, this podcast is in partnership with The Big Step, which tackles football's relationship with gambling. There is an excessive presence of gambling adverts within football, and The Big Step continue to do great work to raise awareness about the dangers of gambling and the impact they can have on so many people's lives. A big thank you as well to all our Patreon members. Those who sign up for as little as just £1 per month can get access to our additional D3D4 daily podcast episodes throughout the week. They are produced by James, who's on this call with us, and they focus in depth on individual clubs and provide previews to some of the most eye-catching fixtures in League 1 and League 2 each weekend. You can sign up now at patreon.com/D3D4football. We're not going to waste any more time. Let's get going, and we will begin, as always, with the world's best third tier. League 1. Now, obviously, we're not going to go through every single fixture this time. We've focused on a handful of clubs from both divisions. We're going to start first by looking at the best festive period, so the period between Boxing Day and the 2nd of January. That League 1 table I compiled, David, who was it who had the best festive period in League 1?
well, for me, Ed, it was Sheffield Wednesday. Wednesday have broke back into those automatic spots. 3 wins out of 3 from their festive period. A really important and valuable 9 points obtained here. Continuing that impressive 14-game unbeaten run in the league, having not lost since the 4th of October, I believe it was, against league leaders Argyle. Played really well throughout this period as well. A 2-1 win over Fleetwood Town away from home, and then back-to-back wins at Hillsborough, 2-0 against Port Vale, and a 5-0 absolute dissection of Cambridge United, respectively.
That was a hammering and a half, that.
Well, with what was it? Was it Josh Windass as well getting his hat trick in that game too? So really good outing for him as well. And I mean, do you know what? Despite that as well, they've got injury concerns with Lee Gregory and Barry Bannon out at the moment as well. With Bannon limping off versus Port Vale and Gregory been out since Boxing Day. I think, it really shows the kind of, I mean, we know that they've got quality, we know that they've got depth, but, you can't really underestimate the quality and depth they've got when they're kind of removing 2 big names such as those, and then you still have the likes of Josh Windaz and Michael Smith who are coming in to provide the goals here. Just all in all, a really great period for Sheffield Wednesday, and they seem to be going just as well as they were in 2022.
Yeah, it's the 5-0 without Bannon really that really catches my eye, because we think of Bannon as one of the superstars of League One, and every time I think he got pulled off early into a previous game, I think against Exeter at the start of December as well, which we were a bit worried about, but he ended up being able to carry on for a little period, and without absent for this game as well, but a 5-0 dominant win. I mean, that win on the 2nd of January really was something, David. They absolutely mauled Cambridge at Hillsborough.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think that says more about Cambridge as well and their kind of lackluster performances as of late. But, we shouldn't take anything away from that Windass hat-trick. We shouldn't take anything away from the fact that Sheffield Wednesday have been nothing short of brilliant. And as you say, without Bannon to kind of be the kind of ticker and the maker that we've kind of come to know from Sheffield Wednesday, it's nice to know that they've got other options and that, Darren Moore is kind of formulating a team that works with Bannon, but also without him as well, when that situation arises.
Yeah, I think it's nice to see Will Vaulks catching the eye as well. George Byers in midfield. Mentioned to Michael Smith as well. Got a goal on the 5-0, got both of the goals in the win over Port Vale as well. And then even you go to that Boxing Day win over Fleetwood Town, where they had to grind it out, and it's a perfect example, really, of the kind of qualities that we see in a promoted side at the end of the season, you have to say.
Yeah, I think so. I think, you're always going to have some tough results. And I think we've seen that in League One and League Two this season. There's kind of teams that are up and above there and around those kind of playoff places and automatic places that are having to grind out results. But I think that just shows the breadth and depth of kind of League One and Two and how much it's come on leaps and bounds. You've just got to look a few seasons ago in comparison to now and actually how close it is all across the table, barring maybe those three at the top. So no, for sure, if you're gonna be any side that's looking to push for promotion, you need to be squeaking out those wins.
Yeah, exceptionally high standards at the top of League One at the moment, and a faultless festive period has taken Sheffield Wednesday up into the automatic places. But James, there was another team in League One who also got 9 points from a possible 9. Who was it?
Yeah, Plymouth Argyle, the Pilgrims marching on impressively, and in all honesty, it's 5 without defeat in all competitions, 5 straight wins, including that one in the Pizza Trophy, I think, against AFC Wimbledon, where they were dead and buried until Sam Cosgrove making us all look bad.
Of all people, Cosgrove. Against Wimbledon, of course, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I remember I still get the odd person delving back into my my personal Twitter account to dig up where I said that I would stay clear of Sam Cosgrove if I was Plymouth. I mean, I think justifiably I mentioned that at the time because he'd come off a couple of atrocious loan spells at Wimbledon and Shrewsbury, and what a wonderful bit of work that Schumacher's done with turning him around individually, but also this team. I mean, they're playing so well over the Christmas period. Of course, they beat Cheltenham. That was a difficult game away from home. They got the 1-0 win there. Then they beat a much changed Wycombe side, playing a completely different formation to normal.
That's their first win at home to Wycombe. I think it was since 2004 in the league.
Yeah, well, I mean, as an Oxford fan, I hate playing Wycombe. They are such a difficult team to play against. You can play well and still come away with nothing. They're that kind of side. And considering that Gareth Ainsworth made 8 changes to this game, it was only 1-0. And Plymouth played a completely different formation. They showed a lot of versatility. They went 4-4-2. They had, I think it was Whittaker right wing and Danny Mayer left wing with Cosgrove playing up front. With Hardy, I think it was in this particular match, and it worked a treat. And then, of course, they're back to their usual formation with the 2 number 10s in the 3-1 win against MK Dons on New Year's Day, and they were faultless, absolutely brilliant performance. They're a solid team, they're versatile, they've got great players across the pitch. They've done some quick business, and I think they have to because, of course, we all know that Whittaker's been recalled by Swansea, so that's a bit of a blow. With Finn Azaz still out, I think, for a little bit of time. I'm not sure what they do because Whittaker's been an absolute gravy train in terms of getting shots off and being a really good attacking threat for them this season. So that's a bit of a blow. But Saxon Early comes in from Norwich, a great signing of the shining for Stevenage so far this season in the division below. They've got a guy called Ben Wayne in from Wellington Phoenix for an undisclosed fee. The coach is there raving about how good he is. We'll have to wait and see how that translates. I mean, I've seen some video footage of him, and he does look a good player. I have
this gut feeling he's going to be incredibly popular. There's just something about this. I think he's relishing the chance to play at home park.
It'd be interesting to see how he does because it's always this slight doubt, isn't there, when you get any player from a league like the A-League or somewhere. It's like when you get a player from Scottish Premiership.
But they picked up Macaulay Gillespie from the A-League, and he's done perfectly on that back line.
Yeah, and again, he was a player that didn't impress me one bit, really, when he played in England prior to going abroad. So sometimes these players develop really well when they're playing in a different country. It opens doors for them, it broadens their horizons. And this guy's going to come in and get a great opportunity in a team that's thriving. I never quite understand, unless Swansea are going to play Whittaker, I don't understand why they recall him, because he's obviously thriving. His development is going to be going through the roof while he's playing big minutes in a team that's top of the league, just below them. I mean, it's a strange decision. There's lots of talk about where he'll end up going. I mean, if he goes to another League One team, I think that's a daft decision from Swansea personally. I don't know why they'd do that.
I quite enjoy the carnage it would cause, can't lie. The meltdown that would come if that happened would be quite funny from a neutral perspective.
Exactly. I will just give a shout out to Adam Randall as well, who's had a great season, going about his business quite quietly in that central midfield role for Argyle. I don't think we've given him probably enough credit for how he's performed this season, and I think he's been excellent. And this is a really good Argyle side. 3 straight wins across the festive period and 9 points from 9. It's you couldn't ask for more, really.
No, you couldn't. I'm really excited to see Saxon Early, who, as you say, grew really well as a player whilst on loan from Norwich at Stevenage in the first half of the season. He had strong competition with Max Clark in that left wing back role that he had to Stevenage. Really good there. You imagine he's going to play a similar position for Argyle, which makes me wonder what's going to happen to the others. Will Ballymumba maybe go on the right? Could we maybe see Joe Edwards get deployed in midfield a bit more because he's probably more naturally
midfield player? Do you think Ballymumba might be moved forward to sort of play a bit more of an attacking role, maybe as a Whittaker replacement? I don't know if he can do that, but I've seen him go forward.
I've always thought he's more suitable to a wider role, maybe a full-back or a wing-back role. But it's an interesting idea. I'm curious what happens. I think he'll handle that step up very nicely, Saxon Early. He's a good player.
And last shout out for Argyle is Dan Scarr. When he's not in the team, I think for some reason they just don't look as assured defensively. And I wonder what Walsall fans are thinking, because when he left there, I doubt any of them thought. I mean, plenty of them probably thought he's a good player in another League Two team and would have a decent career at that level, but I doubt any of them really expected that he'd be a linchpin in a side on the cusp of promotion to the Championship, playing progressive football like they are as well. So, I mean, he's been superb this season. 4
points clear at the top, 6 points clear of third. Argyle continuing to go from strength to strength, and a great festive period. Harry, who's your pick for one of the best festive periods in League One?
Right, now stay with me here, because I appreciate that this team is still in the relegation zone technically. But my team that I think probably had the best festive period is Morecambe. We've been saying for a few weeks now that the situation at the bottom of League One probably looks more concerning for the teams that aren't actually in the relegation zone than the teams that are. And I think the biggest winners at the bottom over the Christmas period were definitely Morecambe. He got 6 points from a possible 9, including a resounding 5-0 win against relegation rivals Burton. And they've moved just 1 point off coming clear of that relegation zone now, with a couple of favourable games coming up. They did start things off.
They looked dead and buried before, didn't they?
It's fascinating, really, yeah, how they've done that.
They did, yeah. I think sort of Morecambe and Forest Green are the two that you thought maybe aren't going to sneak out of there. And I'd probably still suggest that Forest Green haven't got enough in them at the minute to stay up. But Morecambe at the minute, looking like they're coming into a bit of form.
Never doubt the Derek Adams side, eh?
Who'd have thought it?
Yeah.
But I think what they did well over the last couple of games that they haven't done this season is they picked up points against the teams around them. They'd only won 2 games in the league all season. One of those was against Forest Green, but they drew when they went to Burton. They got absolutely hammered by MK Dons earlier in the season. And so picking up wins against Burton and against Accrington Stanley is absolutely huge for them, because obviously not only are you picking up points for yourself, but you're stopping the teams around you from keeping up. I mean, both of those games that they won, they looked pretty assured. They did lose 1-0 at Port Vale. I don't think that's the worst result in the world, because they've been playing
at Plymouth before that, didn't they, as well? I remember, I think we said on this pod.
It's the performances of Connor Ripley again.
Yeah, I mean, he's been brilliant. But I think we all said as well when they lost to Plymouth, it won't be the definer of their season. What will be is the performances coming up against teams around them, like you just said.
Yeah, and I think what they have been doing well, they've been on this horrible run where they hadn't won, I think, since mid-October before the 29th of December. But what they have been doing is they've never been massively outclassed by teams. It's been kind of losing by 1 goal or a lot of draws. And so you knew that they had it in them to do this, and they've had a couple of really good games there. They've got Cheltenham on Saturday at home, and then they travel to Cambridge. And those are 2 more very winnable games against teams that are right down there. So in 2 weeks' time, we could well be seeing them sort of leapfrogging those teams around them.
I think chasing a playoff spot.
That might be slightly too much.
They've got some favourable fixtures, certainly. One of the things I actually noted for Morecambe during this festive period was, you go back to that Port Vale game on Boxing Day, Donald Love got 2 yellow cards, got sent off. He'd been playing a right wing back for a long time. So the following game against Accrington, Derek Adams deployed Ryan Cooney there, and he really caught the eye in that 2-0 win as well, to the point where he persisted with him going into the Burton game as well. And the Burton game, I don't want to dwell on it.
I bet you don't.
That is one of the worst examples of playing a high line I've ever seen in my life. That is one of the worst offside goals I've ever seen in my life as well.
Yeah, I wondered if anyone told Ben Garrett he's not meant to join his centre-backs in the high line. He just seemed to be
That man
outside
gives
of...
me no confidence coming out of the box, James, honestly. That was a all-time stinker from Burton in that game, and it was an all-time stinker from the officials as well. If you haven't seen that fifth Morecambe goal, do go and find it, because it's got to be, 10 plus yards offside? People trying to claim it's a deflection. I quite liked how there were people who saw the video and looked at it and thought, you can't see the whole shot, maybe the right back's not in shot, and there were people who were at the game telling them, no, that genuinely is him offside, and they weren't believing him.
Yeah, it was terrible decision.
Awful. Morecambe, though, a lot of strength. I've got to mention Jensen Weir and Liam Shaw, actually, a pair of loanies playing in midfield. I actually think they're quite good goal-scoring midfielders. Both contributed over this Festive period as well.
Now, yeah.
They're good to have, and Morecambe definitely back into the mix now. And I love the bottom of that League One table, by the way, because you think someone's about to fall adrift, and they get themselves back into it again. And right now, there are 4 points between 19th place Cambridge and 24th place Forest Green. It is tight down there. 6 teams all in the battle to avoid being one of those 4 at the moment. Exciting. My pick for the best Festive period over in League One is Derby County. The Rams were one of 2 sides in League One that collected 7 points from a possible 9 over that Festive period. The other team that collected 7 were Exeter City, who I definitely think do deserve a mention as they continue a very fine season, currently in the top half of the League One table. That 4-3 win Exeter had at Bristol Rovers on Thursday the 29th was a crazy game, and one that, if I'm brutally honest, I'm actually not too surprised happened. You think about how possible it is for that to happen, really, with a pair of chaotic sides that have such high-quality front lines that they have. Aaron Collins is double figures of both goals and assists, by the way, already. Absolute superstar in that league. 23 goal involvements already this season. He's incredible. Derby's Festive period, I believe, is probably a bit more notable than Exeter's, however, because of what it's got people wondering about. The Rams followed a goalless draw at Bolton, which was live on Sky, with a pair of home wins, a 1-0 victory over Cambridge United and a 4-0 demolition of Accrington Stanley. Derby were the only team in League One or League Two who didn't concede a single goal over this Festive period, and coupled with other results, they now sit 4th in the League One table. They've got a game in hand, and all 3 of the teams above them win that. The gap to 3rd is down to 6 points. The gap to 2nd is down to 8. It's got some Derby fans wondering, could they? Could they maybe?
They were my dark horse team.
Ooh, perhaps. Paul Warne's side, they're on a very strong run of form right now. Their last defeat inside 90 minutes in any competition was back on the 21st of October. 15 games since. 9 clean sheets collected in that time as well. Defensively solid too. Warne's got a really consistent backline and deeper midfield pairing going. He's persisting with starting fullbacks in the form of Corey Smith and Louis Sibley. We've seen Everton loanee Lewis Dobbin grab his first league goal during this Festive period. It was the only goal in the Cambridge game. Tom Barkhazen, someone who I think has had maybe mixed opinions about him given his overall contribution this season. He was excellent in the win over Accrington, grabbed a brace in that with David McGoldrick and Conor Hourahan providing the other goals. The only real blemish on Derby's Festive period was a red card for Will Osula, which came around 15 minutes after being brought on in that Accrington game. It was just a really unnecessary one, kicking out at Liam Coyle in the box. He's not done himself any further favours with that. He's on a season-long loan from Sheffield United. I wonder if it might be getting cut short. He's found minutes quite hard to come by recently as part of Derby's front line. His best game actually was the reverse fixture at Accrington at the Crown Ground when he bagged a brace. He hasn't provided any further league goals since though. I'm not sure he's making a worthwhile contribution to Derby and to their season targets. I do think there's a very good player in there, by the way, 19-year-old Dane. What's always stood out to me with Osula when I've seen him is his raw pace, which is absolutely terrifying and a weapon that I don't think any defence would like to come up against. Perhaps the opportunity to flourish as the player we think he can be may need to come at a different club because I'm not entirely sure he's the right fit with the Rams at the moment. We'll have to see.
I think they've just... I saw something as well that they just nicked Mark Thomas as head of recruitment.
Ah, yes, I've been seeing that from your Oxford boys.
Yeah, great. They're going. They're going to do well. That's all I can say. And I think January's going to be a big month for them. It depends on. I mean, I'm not sure quite what their situation is in Gun. Can they pay for players or anything like that? Are they still under that sort of restriction?
Oh, I'm not entirely sure, but...
Yeah, that's the only thing that I'm not sure, because I know they're linked with Curtis Nelson, which doesn't surprise me. But whether or not... I'm sure they can't pay a fee, so I'm not sure how that's going to work.
Yeah, I think there's a wage limit they have to adhere to as well, I think. Right. We'll see what comes through with Derby, but right now they're in a good position. We've looked at the best performing teams in League One over the Festive period. How about some of those who have not had a good Christmas and New Year? James... Who had the worst Festive record in League One?
Yeah, it was unfortunately Salop, Shrewsbury Town. Really poor Festive period for them. And yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a contrast from the previous period of play because they had started to look very good. They'd been, I think, on 3 straight wins prior to this Christmas period, and I thought, oh, good, they're starting to play some good football. They're starting to look like they could push further up the table. At one point, they were as high as 8th, I think it was, in the table. And then suddenly it all comes to an abrupt end. Obviously, self-inflicted very much at Cambridge in many ways. They took the lead in that game, and then Shiloh Tracy scored that wonderful curling right-footed effort, cutting in from that left-hand side to equalise, and then an awful mistake by Shay Dunkley allowed Sam Smith to run clear and bag the winner in a game that they did not deserve to lose. In fairness, they did not deserve to lose that one, but it started a trend as well because Ryan Bowman got sent off late on in this one, and then they played Cheltenham at home, and Luke Leahy was sent off in an altercation I think it was with Charlie Raglan, later overturned to be fair, and then against Fleetwood, a 3-0 defeat, early red card for a handball on the line by Matt Pennington. So there's an issue with Salop that they've basically been playing the same 14 players all season. They haven't got the depth to take suspensions or injuries. They've got players coming back like Aidan O'Brien and Da Costa, but they're not fully fit. Neither is really Bennett as well, who's just come back from a period out. He's, what can you say? This is a team that has been kind of stretched for a long period of time, and I think those 3 games in a short period of time over Christmas just came at the wrong time for them. They just didn't look ready for it. They battled against Fleetwood in fairness, but they had a mad moment where they conceded sort of a couple of poor goals in a very short space of time in that first half. Then they battled really well with 10 men for the second half, and obviously Fleetwood got another goal very late on. But they were so poor in that first 20 minutes or so. It wasn't a great game of football. They didn't get the ball down at all or play it in the way that Steve Cottrell would like, and he was pretty fiercely annoyed. I mean, Jordan Shipley was lucky not to have his leg broken in a tackle by Charlie Raglan, it has to be said, in that game against Cheltenham. I know Charlie, he's not that kind of player, but it was a poor tackle. And I think he actually did it wasn't even called a foul. And I think that's what started this whole altercation, which then got him sent off for a reaction that he did in this sort of the aftermath with Luke Leahy. But, that tackle on Jordan Shipley was appalling. And the problem for Shrewsbury is if that had damaged Shipley's leg in a way that it looked like it possibly could, they would have been really, really short because, of course, George Nurse is out for the season. They're missing Da Costa. He's sort of coming back to fitness. And you've got Jordan Shipley, by hook or by crook, playing left wing back for most of the season so far. And that just is an example of how short they are of body. So January's going to be very important for them. I know they're bringing Killian Phillips on loan from Crystal Palace already, midfielder, so they've added someone. And I think that's important. They just need bodies through the door as soon as possible to try and get them going back in the right direction. Obviously, if they take on Burton next, if Burton play that high line again, Shrewsbury will quickly snap this losing streak, won't they?
Oh, Shrewsbury. That means another pair of Sadie goals. Brilliant. Fantastic. Shrewsbury, 0 points out of 9. The other team who suffered 3 defeats out of 3 over this festive period in League One were Forest Green Rovers. 3 defeats out of 3. 2 goals scored, 6 conceded. It's 4 consecutive defeats to FGR now, which sees them prop up the division in 24th place. Although I will add, such is the state of League One's bottom end, they're actually only 2 points away from safety at the moment, and there was a period on New Year's Day when they were out of the bottom four completely. There was a lot of turmoil, a lot of change going on there. I've got sympathy for Forest Green in truth, because I think there's an alternate universe out there where this festive period has actually gone a lot more in their favour. Their Boxing Day game at Milton Keynes Dons, not much in it at all, ultimately decided by a Daniel Harvey shot from outside the box. The home game against Burton Albion was a real slogfest. Jamil Matt had an opportunity from the penalty spot to equalise Forest Green, but he had his spot kick saved. FGR wouldn't score until the 93rd minute when Burton were already 2-0 ahead, but they definitely did cause the Brewers problems throughout that game. Against Port Vale on New Year's Day, they got the lead inside 2 minutes from Carl McAllister and held on to it for more than 80 minutes in a match which also saw a very nasty injury to Port Vale's Lewis Cass. Thankfully, he does seem to be okay, but it did sound like a pretty nasty one, so I hope he's well. Forest Green conceded an equaliser not long after the injury, and that injury resulted in 14 minutes of additional time, and it was within those 14 minutes that Port Vale got 2 further goals to win the match, one of them an Ellis Harrison penalty, the other from Dennis Politic from a very weird angle. I know there are some Port Vale fans trying to claim it's a quality goal. They're trying to claim that Dennis Politic's got that in his locker, but sorry, there's no goalkeeper who gets the given for being beaten from that position. It's not a good moment at all from Luke McGee. It's been a bad festive period for SGR results-wise, but I actually don't think they're too far off getting things right and getting out of this. They've already dipped into the transfer market already, signing Brandon Cooper on loan from Swansea City. He's a centre-back who turns 23 on the 14th of January. Yeah, I really liked him when he was on loan at Newport County a couple of seasons ago. Had a spell at Swindon Town last season as well. Connor Wickham's been released from his short-term contract, came to an end. I think he's made a good contribution to them, actually, but the real good news...
I was a bit surprised at that, to be honest.
Yeah, a little bit, but I think part of the reason they've maybe done it is because Matty Stevens is back available. He was last season's top scorer at Force. He's back fit, making matchday squads again, getting back up to speed. Hopefully shouldn't be too long until we get to see that partnership of Matty Stevens and Jamil Matt up to speed again up top, with Josh March as an ever-developing alternative up top for Forest Green Rovers. Maybe a bit of hope to believe in. I think Dylan McGeek's made a good impact in midfield as well for FGR. They're not out of this relegation conversation at all. I mean, no one down the bottom is. Let's be real about it. Harry, who was your pick for the worst festive period in League One?
So I picked a team that is in the relegation zone for my best performance of the Christmas period, and I've picked a team that's just outside of the relegation zone for my worst performance, and that's Accrington Stanley. They're just about hovering above 21st spot on goal difference, and they did have a slightly harder run of fixtures maybe than the teams around them, but they only scored 1 goal in 3 games, and that was a Tommy Lee penalty, and that earned them their one and only point in a draw with Barnsley. I think the Derby game especially showed the difficulty they're going to be facing in avoiding the drop. They found themselves 3-0 down at half-time, and they just didn't really show much in the second half to suggest that a comeback would ever be on the cards. I know that they're 2 teams that, in theory, come from very different ends of sort of footballing heavyweight against footballing minnow, but nonetheless, you go in at 3-0 down at half-time in any game, and you want to come out and show a bit of fight. And all you can really say in their defence is that they only conceded 1 in the second half. Particular concern for John Coleman would be that across those 3 games, they conceded 58 shots and they mustered up only 18 in return. I mean, that's a lot to give. That's nearly 20 a game on average. And one of those is against a relegation rival. He's not got a huge squad at his disposal, and he's now also going to have to deal with losing Joe Pritchard for the rest of the season, who's probably Accrington's best player.
Quality player, yeah.
He said in his post-match presser against Derby that any team in League One would miss Joe Pritchard. I think that's probably right. I think if he'd kept himself fit, he might have found himself wearing a different shirt by the end of January anyway. But that won't be the case now, because it sounds like we're not going to see him again until the start of next season. And he did also see Mitch Clark limp off against Derby, so hopefully that's nothing too serious. I haven't heard anything about that one yet. Seamus Connolly suggested in his post-match interview after the Derby game that new faces might be on their way into the club. They've not got a huge budget, so I think it's probably going to have to be a case of shifting players out to bring new ones in, or if not, just trying to sort of bring people in on cheap loan deals. I've heard rumours that they're about to sign Brentford striker Aaron Presley on loan. Obviously, he was at Wimbledon last season. He had that loan cut short. He got 4 goals in 25 there, so not massively prolific, but it might be one that works out pretty well for them. He's very tall.
They've been playing Tommy Lee and Sean Wally up front most of the season, so
just to have a striker.
Yeah, Josh Woods is back though as well. He's a good young player, I think.
And I think Sean McConville's back in squads as well. I've seen recently.
He is, yeah. He was on the bench, I think, at the weekend.
Not looking good for Accrington though, is it? It's the first time I've actually been worried about them properly since they've been at this level.
Yeah, it's
I think.
the same for me as well. Yeah, not good. The Pritchard loss is a real one because he's such a key creator for them as well. And on Aaron Presley, I'm a bit hesitant doing this now because of Cosgrove, but I didn't really think much of him at Wimbledon. I've got to be honest. He seemed to be an okay.
He's going to be the Golden Boot winner now.
Well, probably now. Let's hope for Accrington's sake it is. But he never really caught my eye in the time I saw him with Wimbledon. So maybe there's a chance for it to work. But Accrington desperately need a strike as well. And I think the big frustration, Harry, you'd agree, is that loss to Morecambe, which was the really crucial one out of the lot, and seen off pretty comfortably away at the Mazuma to Morecambe.
Yeah, well, I mean, you come away from a draw with Barnsley, who were in good form, and you think, okay, we're playing a team around us in this relegation battle. In our next game, we'll go there and we'll try and get a result. And they just didn't really show much fight. It wasn't quite as one-sided as the Derby game, but you didn't watch at any point and think Accrington were going to win. And so I've just been having a look, and they've got a much harder run of fixtures coming up as well. They've got Bristol Rovers, Barnsley again, Plymouth and Ipswich. And you look at those 4 games and you think, are they going to pick up any points out of them at all? Don't want to sound too pessimistic. But yeah, you worry that they might start to slide down. And with Morecambe playing the way they are, with Burton playing the way they were before Sunday, because we don't mention that game.
Thank you.
You just think that Stanley are the team that are most likely to be left behind, unfortunately.
Yeah, deeply worrying. The difference between them and Burton Albion at the minute of level and points is a single goal difference. That's it. I think it's -18 to Burton, -17 to Accrington. Burton have scored more goals. So had that 5th goal for Morecambe been rightly disallowed, Burton would have actually been outside the bottom 4 at the moment on goal difference. And I'm not bitter about that at all, I promise. Not at all.
You just hope the table doesn't finish like this, and that is the end goal.
If that actually ends up mattering, I will lose my mind. But let's hope that's not the case. Certainly, David, who was your suggestion for the worst festive period in League One?
Yeah, so for me, it's the old Portsmouth. I don't think Pompey have had a great festive period at all. Overall in the league, it's not really been their year so far. 9 games without a win, only 1 win in the last 14, which has now seen Nicky and Danny Cowley lose their jobs at Fratton Park. To me, this is probably, from what I've seen from the chief executive, Andrew Cullen, and the board in general in their comments, it was clearly a very difficult decision to make. But I think, they've kept them for as long as they possibly can, in my opinion, given the recent results. And I'm not really sure there was much of a justification in keeping them in post anymore, given the run of results and given the fact that Portsmouth are kind of aiming for playoff places for this season, whether they get them or not.
1 win in 14, isn't it?
Yeah, it's it's really unfortunate for Nicky and Danny, because I think they're fantastic managers, and I think they'll be absolutely fine and they'll find their feet somewhere else.
It's not only that, they're fantastic people, by the way. You see the fallout from the news, and it's sympathetic from the Pompey fan base, which is quite nice. I think when you see a manager normally depart, it's kind of a bit of celebration from the fans, but this lot they're genuinely gutted this hasn't worked out.
Yeah,
I mean, you're right.
They're 2 very good managers who have had a really good stint in a number of clubs around. And I think, even when we were first talking about their appointment, we were all saying how we thought it could be a really, really positive appointment for Pompey and for them, and it could really be a match made in heaven, but it's not quite worked out that way. The only thing obviously now is that they've got to find a manager. It's kind of, for me, it's the old trolley problem. On one side, you've kind of got the fact that they could have sacked them, which they've obviously ultimately done now, and now have to find a manager, as well as potentially strengthening in the transfer market. And then there's the other side, is if they didn't, would the results keep going this way, and would it just keep them further and further away from their goals this season? So I guess we'll have to see for the rest of the season whether Cullen's decision was the correct one. But going to their actual results, they had a 0-0 draw with Exeter away, a respectable 2-2 draw with third place Ipswich, and a 3-1 home loss to Cheltenham, which in fairness is just not good enough for a team that has those playoff aspirations and a team with the kind of quality that Portsmouth have, that I just don't think
having watched Charlton against Oxford, right, that Charlton first half is the worst team I've seen play Oxford this season. And to be fair, like, Dean Holden for some reason played the kids and the sort of more senior guys on the bench, and when he brought them on in the second half, they looked a lot better. But you're right, losing to Charlton, who were in the kind of form they were before heading to Fratton Park, that was kind of the final nail in the coffin, wasn't it?
Yeah, I just, I find it really difficult, to be fair, because I'm as the same as you guys. I'm a big fan of them, but you can't, with like a 2-2 draw against Ipswich is fantastic, but then you look at the other result, with the 3-1 loss to Cheltenham and then a 0-0 draws to Exeter, which in fact, in that game, in my opinion, I felt like they dominated. They just couldn't take their chances. I didn't think they played particularly poorly. And to be fair, I don't think across their even in their last 14 games, for me, I don't think they've played particularly bad. I just think that they're not necessarily clinical enough, and maybe a new face is going to increase that ability for them to be a bit more clinical here.
I do think they haven't got the best out of that squad, though, when you look at the talent. I think there is, and I think sometimes the problem is when you start losing or not winning, in this case, more than losing, is that they chopped and changed quite a lot of things like the formation and the personnel, and rather than trying to build from a more solid position and just keeping with the back four, they went with this back three. They tried different players in wing back roles, and it just unless it gets results, it starts to look really bad, and they just weren't getting the victories they needed to sort of save their jobs. And I'm like all of you guys, I've interviewed Danny a few times, and he's a great guy. It's just a shame it didn't work out.
I hate to admit it, but Barton's comments about the fourth or two were right. They're not going to get very far with it. They started the season so well, and it's fallen away, tailed off badly, and the decision to move on was absolutely the right one. I had one final question, boys, before we drop down to League Two. Ipswich Town, I've got them 9th in my League One festive period table. They took 5 points from a possible 9. There was a 3-0 win over Oxford United on Boxing Day, followed up with a 2-2 draw at Portsmouth and a 1-1 draw at Lincoln City. They required late equalisers on both occasions to earn those points. Not a bad points return 5, but given what Argyle and Sheffield Wednesday have done in this festive period, it's seen Ipswich not only lose ground with top spot, but also drop to 3rd. They're now 2 points behind Sheffield Wednesday in the League One table. So, is Ipswich Town's festive period a good one or a bad one in your eyes?
I think in relation to the other two, it's probably not great, is it? But I don't think it's a...
That's the thing. It's just the
a
standards, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it's a poor festive period if you compare it across the league. But I think if you're comparing it to where they want to be, I think it's a very similar issue to how we were discussing with Portsmouth a moment ago. I think it's the fact that there is clearly a lot of quality in this squad, but McKenna was doing really well to get it out of it. But just something's changed, and I feel like they need... I'm not sure whether they need bodies, because I don't really feel like that's what Ipswich need. I just feel like they need an injection of energy, that they need something else that they're not quite producing right now.
I'd be inclined to say it's almost just 2 games when they weren't the best, because, James, you were full of praise for them with that Boxing Day win.
Yeah, they were superb. I mean, they were a class above Oxford, and Oxford are a decent side on their day, but they outclassed us completely, despite some arguments I've had on Twitter with Oxford fans suggesting that it was all Oxford's own making and Ipswich were rubbish. I mean, that's just nonsense. Ipswich were far, far the better team. But, you're right, it's all in context, isn't it? If you're chasing the automatic promotions places with 2 other teams and they go and get 9 points from 9, 5 from 9 is a poor return, and only 1 win in the last 4 is not great reading for a side that are having to just maintain almost a completely perfect record to maintain parity with the teams above them. It's crazy. It's
brutal, that top 3, isn't it? Because one of them's going to miss out on automatics and have to drop into the playoffs. And it's by no means season over if you do drop into those playoffs, by the way, such as the standard up at the top. But none of those 3 want to be it right now. And at the moment, it's Ipswich who occupied that position. Let's drop down and take a look at the world's best 4th tier.
League 2.
League 2, I'm going to kick off this, and in the table I compiled of the best festive records in League 2 between the 26th of December and the 2nd of January, there's only one team that finished with a maximum of 9 points from a possible 9 in League 2, and that team was Sutton United. They got a triple header of 2-1 victories, first away at Crawley Town, who, yes, we will get on to later, don't worry about that. The second 2-1 was against Gillingham, who again... we will have an incoming conversation about them as well. And then most impressively for me as well, an all-London clash against an AFC Wimbledon side that were actually 10 unbeaten in the league prior to this game, completing a league double over the Dons in the process actually. Sutton United are up into the top half, and most exciting of all for me, they finally got key men back, in particular Ben Goodlith, who is a really good centre-back, still only 23 years old as well. He has been out injured since the very start of the season, but has got back into the starting 11 for the last 2 matches. Matt Gray's very carefully managing his minutes as he gets back up to speed, of course. When Goodlith is alongside Louis John, that is the best centre-back partnership Sutton United can have, and him being there allows them to form the best backline they possibly can as well. Joe Kitts in his natural right-back role, Rob Milsom at left-back as well. Goodlith being there means that against AC Wimbledon, Enzio Baldovine was able to play in his more natural winger role as well. But I will add, I think he's possibly been Sutton's best performer over this festive period, including that spell he had, where he's had to spend in an auxiliary fullback role as well. He's really been good. Alistair Smith's back fully fit and firing, and he's a great midfield partner for Craig Eastman. Omar Begill and Donovan Wilson lead the line, and the final guy I want to mention for Sutton is Will Randall. He is my favourite player in all of League Two. 25-year-old winger, started out at Swindon Town, moved to Wolverhampton Wanderers while still very young. He's had quite a number of clubs, including a brief spell out in Spain's lower leagues, but since moving to Sutton United in July 2019, he has grown from strength to strength. Randall got the opener in the ASIC Wimbledon game, the exact kind of goal I associate Will Randall with, coming in on his right foot from off the left-hand side, providing a low finish into the bottom corner. This is the best goal-scoring season of his career so far, and with the exciting news that David Adjeboy is coming back on loan from Peterborough United to the second half of the season to return to Sutton, your wide options for the Amber and Chocolates now is those two alongside Endy Baldivine and Luton Town loaded Josh Neufeld, who's caught the eye as well. A full-strength Sutton United is a very good League Two team, and one I think we can rightly get excited about. 3 wins from 3 over the festive period for Sutton United. David, who out of the teams did you pick as the best festive period in League Two?
So, a bit of a conflict of interest here, pal, but Stevenage is who I've gone for. Sitting really comfortably in second place at the moment, 5 points clear of Northampton Town, largely helped by sharing the points with Orient in a very good game between the two, and taking all 3 points from Crawley and Gillingham. Need I say more on that? Steve Evans' side competed really well against Orient, with both having plenty of chances, but ultimately it's one of those games where they've kind of cancelled each other out. Before Crawley would display some of the most woeful defending I thought I'd ever seen, until I watched Burton earlier this week.
There's no need for
that. to gift Jordan Roberts with a goal, and obviously gift that win to Stevenage. Yeah, I mean, Gillingham giving them kind of very little challenge. Gillingham haven't won an away game, or haven't really got much out of an away game all season. 2 defenders on Carl Piergiani, but they've kind of not really given him anything.
He is an absolute monster, him. And we knew it already, but I've just been reminded of it this week.
Just phenomenal,
He's
isn't
incredible.
But I mean, this one was him being really great and the Gills defence being really poor. Tucks away the header, 1-0 to Stevenage, with him. As we've already touched on, Saxon Early was recalled by Norwich, so I'm sure that Stevenage will be looking to dip into the transfer market to reinforce their squad. I mean, Steve Evans has already made some waves. He's completed the permanent signing today, just a few hours ago, of Jake Forster-Karski from Charlton Athletic, which for kind of League Two level is phenomenal. And what Steve Evans is doing, I hate to give him this kind of praise, but what he's doing in the Stevenage side is just, I feel like I need to apologise for Stevenage fans for my remarks earlier this season to say that I don't think that they could maintain this, because they've clearly proved me well and truly wrong.
Second in the league, 2 points off first now because of Orient's results as well, and they've just strengthened. And James Forster-Karski, I think, is just a phenomenal sign for League Two. It's the same thing they have when Gilby arrived on loan.
Yeah, he's too good for the level. I mean, I saw his namesakes, Darren Caskey play, obviously for Reading, and Nicky Forster play. I'm much older than you guys, so if he's a combination of those two, then he's going to be good. But yeah, he's a great player, classy midfielder, and a player too good for the level. Great signing.
Yeah, I think Jordan Roberts is another one to mention in midfield as well. And then Piergiani needs to be in everybody's team of the season, because he has just been phenomenal. A rock in both boxes, absolutely incredible. And a brilliant festive period for Stevenage, almost maximum points. That draw with Orient was actually quite an entertaining game for a 0-0. I think you've had a lot of drabber 0-0s on that one. It felt very feisty, quite back and forth. I remember Luther Wilden had quite a hard time against Paul Smith. I do remember that. He gave them a turnaround. But then again, I don't think there's anything worse than being a right back up against Paul Smith in League Two. It's just a horrible job to have to handle. And Stevenage emerged from this festive period without defeat. Now, picking the rest of our best festive period picks was difficult, because there were a lot of teams in League Two that actually finished with 6 points, 2 wins and a defeat. So picking from them was quite difficult. But James, I think you'd agree, there's one we definitely have to mention because of the significance at the bottom of the table.
Yeah, Colchester definitely deserve a mention. Beating Gillingham by 1-0 at the Priestfield. Then they were slightly unlucky to lose 2-1 at home to AFC Wimbledon before a very good result, 1-0 win against Swindon on New Year's Day. And it's just they very much needed. The results, as you say, down in the bottom of the table, 6 points is huge, and it's really pushed them up out of that bottom two, and they've got a 4-point cushion now over Rochdale, who've slipped into there. So very good performances. Connor Wood arrived on loan from Leyton Orient as well, and I think he's a good left back option for them. I think their actual current left back, Kazim, has done a brilliant job this season, youngster, with Shamadu on the other side. They've been really, really good in the last couple of games. They were very, very good against Swindon. I like the fact that Luke Hannant, Noah Chilvers and Samson Tavai played against Swindon and gave them a lot of problems. You know, Swindon did create chances. That's always going to happen, but they stayed resolute and strong. Their goalkeeper came big with a couple of good stops, and it's a massive result for them. And getting 2 clean sheets in across the Christmas period for a team that have struggled defensively and struggle for goals, it's massive for them. And I think Colchester and Matt Bloomfield deserve a lot of credit for that festive period.
Yeah, crucial as well. I think the formation change has played a bit of a part as well. They were persistent with this 4-2-3-1, never really were able to find the right midfield combination, but they've gone to a back three with Luke Chambers, Tommy Smith and Tom Dallison forming that back line really consistently as well. It's Chamadou and Kazim really bomb on forwards, and we're starting to see Connor Wood in there as well. And then, of course, just recently, James, they've announced the signing of Arthur Reed from Stevenage as well, which you would imagine would be the reason why Thor Stokowski came in, or possibly the cause of that as well. And I like to think he could be a good sign for them, because Reed, I think he's actually a decent League Two midfielder to have.
Yeah, he's a good player, very good player, and someone I think will add a lot of energy into that midfield and give him another option for sure.
A bit of the rumour mill saying Danny Johnson might be on the move as well, because his time at Walsall is going to come to an end on loan from Mansfield.
That would be I'd be surprised. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised to see him move on from Mansfield, but you know, Walsall will be disappointed if they lose him.
Yeah, Walsall have made a couple of losses already. They've already lost Liam Bennett, of course. We won't mention the Walsall on this, but they have lost Liam Bennett, who's gone back up to Cambridge and played for Cambridge in their 5-0 loss at Hillsborough as well. So I reckon he kind of wishes he was back in the best squad at the moment, given what's happened to him on the second there. A final thing to quickly mention to Colchester. Sadly, Matty Longstaff's loan from Newcastle has come to an end. It's just been ravaged by injury, which is a shame, because it was an eye-catching one when it arrived. It's sadly not happened for him, so we'll see how Colchester adapt from that going forwards. Harry, who's your pick for the best festive period in League Two?
So I've gone for a team that only got a paltry 6 points out of 9, and one that I'm going to put my hands up and admit I've not really given them a lot of credit so far this season. I don't know how much I've talked about them on the podcast, but definitely in my own mind, and that's Bradford City. They lost at Carlisle on Boxing Day, and that was their third in a row in the league. They didn't have a single shot on target in that game, and it kind of felt a bit like they were in free fall. And then on the 29th, they had a big local derby at Valley Parade against Harrogate Town, who always turn up at Bradford and beat them. And a first-minute goal from Tyreek Wright secured them the win in the end. It wasn't the prettiest of games, but it got them back to winning ways. And like I say, Harrogate have been a real bogey team for them. It's one that I always look out for, because they just seem to turn up and get a result. And so they've got a league double over them for the first time in League Two.
Still lost in the FA Cup, though, I should add.
They did lose them in the FA Cup, yeah. But you can't have it always. And then Salford City turned up to Valley Parade at the weekend, and they did exactly the same thing. It was quite a bit more entertaining. It finished 3-2. But again, 2 league doubles against teams that were hard to beat for different reasons. And they now find themselves in 5th place behind Carlisle on goal difference only. I mean, you think about how much we've been singing the praises of Paul Simpson and Carlisle. And it turns out that this whole time Bradford have been right behind them, and they've actually got a game in hand, so they could easily leapfrog them up into 4th. They're still 7 points off the automatics, but in Harry Lewis, I think they've got one of the best keepers in the league. Mm-hmm. They've got a striker on double figures who didn't even start in either of those wins. And they probably have got a fair amount of pull in the transfer market. I mean, we saw over the summer the players that they were bringing in. I was lost for words the other day when they announced that they brought Matt Derbyshire to the club, as I thought he must have retired probably at least 10 years ago. And I'm not sure he's necessarily what they need. But then again, I've never been a Premier League manager, and Mark Hughes has. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt with that signing for now. I would like to see them strengthen in centre midfield, as the biggest criticism measured against this side, especially in that Carlisle game, is that they just don't seem to contend too well in midfield battles. We've got Smallwood and Gilead, both good players on their day, but it doesn't seem to be working out playing them in a 2. And so in the 2 games that they won over Christmas, they brought in Levi Sutton and moved to a midfield 3. And it did work, but the problem with that is you're then sort of taking the likes of Tyreek Wright and Abu Isa out of the game. They thrive on that wing play, and when you've got a striker like Andy Cook, you want the ball out wide and you want to be whipping it in. So I'd like to see them maybe bring somebody in who can sort of bring a bit of calmness into that midfield so they can go back to playing with two centre mids and keeping that wide play going.
Yeah, I quite like this formation change they've gone to, though, to a midfield diamond, and that's part of what's contributed to these 2 wins here that's got them in a good position in the table, and a decent festive period for the Bantams, for sure. Shall we drop down the bottom of League 2 then, and discuss, of all teams, James, Crawley Town? Take the mic.
Yeah, well, I'll try and keep my counsel because I don't want to say too much that I'll regret, but there's a lot going on at this club and none of it's good. Matty Etherington and Simon Davies gone already after their kind of controversial appointment, which clearly we all were very sceptical about. Darren Byfield came in and did their interim job. Tom Nichols, their star player, sold to relegation rivals Gillingham, which has gone down, as you can imagine, like a lead balloon. It really is just awful. And over the festive period, they lost obviously to Sutton, they lost to Stevenage, and a better performance in a 2-2 draw with Newport, but certain key senior players weren't there. The club have said that they're not going to return in a Crawley shirt. There's something going on behind the scenes which looks pretty ugly. So we're expecting some statements coming out maybe next week about it. I'm not completely sure, but it's not looking good. On the pitch, it's a shambles. Off it, it's even worse. And you've got Preston Johnson saying, I'm coming over to England to personally oversee the next appointment of a manager and the importance of this January transfer window. I would be, if I was a Crawley fan, telling him to stay in America because the damage he's done already to this club is unbelievable. They built up a really respectable sort of reputation recently, and then all of a sudden it's come crashing down in a very, very short period of time just due to the stupid nature of this WAGMI project. And I can't stress enough how precarious their situation is as they go into a January transfer window with quite a sort of mixed squad of inexperienced players and a manager who hasn't got any experience with. It's just very, very difficult to see how this club goes moving forward positive. And I tell you who they parallel me with. They remind me of Oldham under the Lemsegums. Owners who hadn't got a clue, thought it would be easy, came in with a weird plan about, in Lemsegum's case, signing foreign players and giving them sort of performances in League Two. WAGMI have come and said, we're going to buy young players, we're going to be the internet's team. Nonsense. And look what's happened. It's ending in tears. We're halfway through the season and it's not been good so far. So I'm pretty angry about this. A lot of the fans are angry, and it's just awful, isn't it? Let's be honest.
David, you're down the bottom of League 2 alongside Crawley. Can you really understand what's going on there? Are you as amazed with this as I am? Because I know we discussed this at the start of the season when WAGMI originally came in, and we said, okay, we'll see what happens. We naturally carried a bit of scepticism because it was all this idea about trying things new, seeing this, and people had their worries about it, and I understood that at the time. But I wanted to remain hopeful. It's just been an absolute car crash.
Doesn't seem real, does it?
No, it just doesn't.
I feel like that's what I'm sitting here doing, and I think, as a fan of the team that's obviously in some ways benefited from this as well with the sale of Tom Nichols, this is really strange to me because I almost feel like this is the same position Gills were in maybe 11, 12 days ago, or have been in for years, where maybe not in the same way, where it's been used as a project for the internet's team and however you want to say it, but for me, I don't understand why you would buy a football club, give the fans hope that you're going to do something with it, and just, even the statements that Preston Johnson's come out with, he sat in the dugout with the manager. He's essentially choosing the team that goes out. What's the point in having a manager when the owner is picking the squad? None of this really makes sense. And I can't help, even as, I was just as surprised as probably anyone else when that Tom Nichols signing went through. And I couldn't help.
It utterly blows my mind, that signing.
To be honest, I wasn't even necessarily happy for Gills. I was disappointed for Crawley. I just don't understand what happens there. Yes, I know that he might have had, I'm hearing rumours that he had 6 months left on his contract, and that was that. But, it's strange to me that you would then sell to a relegation rival as well, and you wouldn't maybe hold on for those 6 months and see what he could do with the squad, maybe try and bring in some reinforcements and see where you go with that. But it just seems like there seems to just be an uprising there as well. You know, Kezia Paya came out and clearly made comments about it and showed his disdain for the fact that move had occurred. And I can't help but agree with him. I think any club that is willing to sell their best player and not have some sort of contingency plan in place is absolutely ludicrous. I don't know where they go from here. I don't know what happens, and I completely echo James's thoughts.
I'm not sure they know where they're going from here. That's the worrying thing. We all as outsiders don't know what's happening. I'm not sure they inside know. The players certainly don't.
No, but I don't necessarily expect the players to know, and I don't expect the fans to know, but I think it's more worrying, exactly as you say. I don't think Preston knows what he's doing. I can't remember the other guy's name, but I don't think he knows what he's doing either. I think they came into this business and they came to this club. You know, they spouted so much nonsense about, can you skip League Two if you go unbeaten and go straight to the Championship?
That was tongue in cheek, but it's backfired.
Of course. But it's the fact that, you know, there's comments like that, and then if you're not going to run the football club properly, you know, the least that Crawley Town fans are going to want to expect is a team that can be competitive. I think, you know, what they came in with was a very fanciful idea, which in practical terms has clearly worked out terribly. It could have been something good, possibly, but no one would have necessarily have known that. But I think that when you come into this situation and you, as a chairman, then make the comments that he's made and continuously make those comments, I think I'm fuming for those fans as well, because it just frustrates me as a fan of a team that, you know, we've not necessarily had the best of times, and Scally wasn't the greatest of owners, but he certainly would never have done this. He had enough respect for the club that he wouldn't have basically driven it into the ground in as little time as they've managed to do.
It's a mess on and off the pitch. I mean, you take the Festive period alone, those 2 defeats, that draw with Newport, they were 2-0 up with the Dom Telford brace. Newport get goals to secure the point late on, and then both managers are also sent off in the aftermath of right at the end of that game as well. What's his name now? Darren Byfield dismissed the Crawley. It basically makes Preston the next available man in the dugout at this rate, David. It's just...
It almost feels like that's what he's intending to do anyway, doesn't it? You know, even if you get someone...
really hope not.
But even if you get someone in, if you are, as an owner of a football club, you are putting yourself in the dugout, you are putting yourself in a situation where you don't trust your manager. You don't trust the person you've employed to do that job. You are micromanaging them. Like, imagine in anyone else's job, if someone sits there and micromanages you the whole time, like, nobody, like, who is going to go near that Crawley Town management job?
That's a good question.
Who is going to do it? And unless you're somebody who's potentially going for your first job, which is clearly what they've been aiming for anyway, I don't think there's anyone with a shred of experience that's going to go anywhere near that job, because nobody's going to want a relegation on well, especially not a relegation out of the EFL. And that looks to be, unfortunately for Crawley fans, that looks to be the only way things are going with these owners in charge.
I really sympathise with fans of the club. I caught up the game with Stevenage on iFollow. Stevenage were just dominant throughout. There was a late Tom Telford penalty. There was a consolation goal to Crawley. The fans travelled in a good number. I carry so much admiration for those people who continue to follow Crawley Town in times like this. It's just so difficult for them, and such a shame what's happening. And I just hope it can sort to them, because it's a terrible situation that this won't be the last we talk about them either at the field. There'll probably be something that happens in the following week as well. It's such a shame what's happening to Crawley Town right now, and they've had a bad Festive period to contribute to a bad season. David, who else had a weak Festive period in League Two?
Well, it's just been a generally weak season, hasn't it? And it's Gillingham, isn't it? You know, there are some positives in the Festive period, in fairness. The takeover, Brad Gallinson taking over on the 23rd of December, that is confirmed now. He is the now majority shareholder of the club. That is a positive. But just because the Brad Gallison era has started, it seems that the tenure of, Paul Scally's tenure has finished. Nothing has obviously changed. I mean, we've covered it already. The Tom Nichols signing has already happened. Callum Harriott made his debut as well. So there are pluses, but
You got your
it's hard
seventh
to
league goal of the season as well.
We did,
Robbie McKenzie.
yeah, but only 7, yeah.
I think he scored 24 league goals in 2022, I saw.
It's
That's
pitiful, isn't it? It's
Oh.
really pitiful. That's 2 a month.
It is too.
That's
wow.
2 goals a month. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, look, a 1-0 loss to Stevenage, kind of, outshining us, better quality. The 1-0 loss to Colchester, arguably a game we should have been more competitive in. I just feel like there's no fight here, Ed, to be honest. And the one time we show fight was in the Sutton game. Fighting back, as you say, 78th minute, Robbie McKenzie getting that draw to draw level, and then Craig Eastman would come back and score in extra time to give us that defeat. Really frustrating. Yeah, I mean, look, it's clear that Gillingham need bodies here. We've always operated with a relatively small squad. The last couple of years have been terrible. We definitely need someone that's more creative in that midfield. I think it's an absolutely long shot, but personally, I'd love to see Ben Thompson come back. He's not getting minutes at Peterborough right now. He's way too good for League Two, but it would be nice to get some minutes in his legs. And, he knows Harris. He was with us last year. Hopefully that would be an ideal move. I think it's wholly unrealistic though. And then maybe another forward option would be nice.
There's
we've
plenty
got
to
Tom
pursue
Nichols
for
in.
Gillingham now, but the big question now, David, really is Harris. Neil Harris.
I'm struggling.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I still, personally, from an outside perspective, I carry a lot of sympathy with it because of what he's having to deal with. But I do also understand the frustrations that are there with the Gillingham fan base around results.
I think it's a bit of a catch-22. You kind of, you either stick with him, a proven and he is a proven manager, but he's not really showing that right now. But it's the alternative of, now Gallison's in. Is he going to give him the resources that are needed? How's the recruitment going to go? But do you give him the January window to make those changes, and then you're changing the manager anyway, and then you've got to wait until the summer before you can make any additions for a new manager? Or do you do what Portsmouth has done and cut him loose now so he gets more than 1 day in the transfer market, which is obviously what he got last year. It's really difficult because I don't know who else comes in, and I don't know who else is going to want to touch this job. I think it's not so similar in the Crawley respect, but I don't think the situations are too dissimilar.
I'd say there's more of a feeling of optimism around Gillingham certainly than Crawley, though.
I would completely agree with the takeover, and I think there is opportunities to improve, and I think there's clearly finances there to improve. I can't remember the last time we paid an undisclosed fee for a player. It's all kind of been free transfers, but there's got to be a lot that's going to change, and there has to be. And I think this January window is going to be massive, if not for holding our league status, but just as a club in general. I think, new ownership provides new opportunities and new avenues. But the sad thing for Gallinson is Gills fans are just going to be on him, and we're going to expect that to be instantaneous. And, we both know as well as anybody else does, Ed, that success is not instantaneous in football, and you can't achieve that sort of success that people will want it so quickly. So it may take dropping out to do anything. But for me, that is an absolute, that's the last straw. You can't drop out of the Football League, because getting back into it, as we've seen for Oldham and for other teams, is nigh on, the chances of doing it are just infinitesimal.
It's going to be an intriguing January for Gills. Definitely, I'm keeping an eye on that closely to see what happens both on and off the pitch there. My pick for the worst festive period in League 2 is Rochdale. Just a single point for them over this festive period. They got a goalless draw up at Barrow in a game where Rochdale didn't even register a single shot on target. That's worth mentioning. Coupled with that draw is a defeat at home to fellow strugglers Hartlepool United and a ridiculous 4-3 defeat away at Doncaster Rovers. A game that would be pretty fitting of our infamous Rochdale scale, I'd have to say. They were 2-0 down, they pulled it back to 2-2. They were 3-2 down at half-time, back level at 3-3, then beaten by a winner from Tom Anderson, who apparently some of the Doncaster crowd were booing during the match. They weren't happy with his response following their defeats on Boxing Day as well, which wasn't great to see, but he ended up getting the last laugh there with the winner for Doncaster. The festive period concludes with Rochdale inside the League 2 relegation zone. There is a 3-point gap between themselves and 22nd place Hartlepool United. I've been listening to Jim Bentley's comments both pre-game and post-game throughout the season. There's a clear frustration in the number of individual mistakes made by his players during matches, particularly notable during that 4-3 defeat at Doncaster, of course. He did have a lot of praise for Dale's defending during the draw with Barrow, described as workmanlike, but he did also point out rightly that it just should be the minimum requirement for a team in any division, really. I do believe this Rochdale team is better than its current position reflects. Not a huge amount better, I should add, but it's a group that I think really should be improving where they currently reside. There are some very capable players in that squad for me. Scott Quigley up top being one in particular, who's on loan from Stockport County at the moment. The big worry for Rochdale, though, is matters away from the pitch. Dale are in a very difficult financial position right now. As a message published back on the 30th of December shows, the club are inviting offers for investment at the moment. They've issued a further 450,000 shares in the club on top of what has already been in place, just in order to raise some much needed capital. Supporters have done what they can to help with that, but that on its own is not enough. External investment is desperately needed because, as their chairman recently noted in a statement, Rochdale could likely face a loss in the region of 1.2 million during this financial year, and that's a similar amount to what they lost during the COVID season that was 2020 to 2021. It's
phenomenal amount of money.
It's undoubtedly a very difficult time right now for Rochdale Football Club. Not great. And like Gillingham, they occupy a place in the bottom two at the moment as well. Harry, give us your pick, please, for the worst festive period in League Two.
Well, it feels a bit wrong to be talking about these in the same breath as the clubs that have just come before. But for me, a team that only got 1 point out of the possible 9, and that's table toppers Leyton Orient. As is the case with any club in the Football League, Orient were always going to hit a bad run of form at some point. And so hopefully it's nothing too much to worry about at the minute. But two 0-0 draws and a 1-0 loss means no goals scored in 3 games. 2 points, not 1 point. 2 points over the festive period. And it is concerning to see them not scoring in any of those 3 games. Paul Smith is having the best season of his life, but outside of him, there aren't really any players in that current squad who are overly prolific. They've got Aaron Drynham coming up with a few, Charlie Kellman as well, but they've been relying a bit on Jaden Wareham as well, the young striker, who I don't think scored for the club yet, certainly not in the league. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe going in to try and get a striker in this January window. And I just think it would be nice to see a bit more actual wing play from Smith and sort of Theo Archibald as well. They're both really good wingers, and Paul Smith's been coming in and scoring a lot of goals, but he can also be so dangerous out on that right wing. And you think with the right target man in the middle, they could be scoring a lot more goals than they are at the minute. Omar Beckles was also shown a straight red right at the end of that Northampton loss, and Daniel Happe went off injured, so that's 2 centre-backs lost in the same game. The director of football, Martin Ling, gave an interview earlier today that I listened to, where he suggested that the club's probably already working on bringing in reinforcements. He did mention that injuries had sort of forced his hand a bit there, and so, again, I wouldn't be surprised to see at least one centre-back probably coming in. I do think as important as that, it'll be holding on to players that have gotten to where they are so far. Apparently Salford might be sniffing around Paul Smith at the minute, so they'll be wanting to keep hold of him. And I wouldn't be surprised personally to see League One clubs going in for Lawrence Vigouroux as well. I think he's a really good goalkeeper.
Yeah, and he's for a long time though, yeah.
Yeah, he's been a huge part of their season, hasn't he? And you think there's a few players like that who are going to be attracting attention, as is always the case when you're up at the top. I would definitely just like to say thank you to Leyton Orient, though. This bad run of form means that we might actually get a title race in League Two this year. That was the one thing that was lacking a bit last year. I know Exeter sort of came through a bit towards the end, but it was always Forest Green's to lose, wasn't it? Whereas this year, we've got Stevenage 2 points off them now. We've got Northampton not that far off, really, and it is going to make for an exciting second half of the season up at the top.
Yeah, it is. Leyton Orient, I suppose, is a bit like what we say with Ipswich in League One. It's actually not that bad. They're still well clear of 4th place at the moment, which is fine. You would have to say automatic promotion by whatever means is the target now for Leyton Orient given the first half of their season. But having played both of the top 2 and not beaten either of them without scoring a goal, it's just not ideal for them at the minute, Harry, you'd have to say. And yeah, Stevenage are right on their shoulder right now.
Yeah, and that's the problem, isn't it? Stevenage, I think all of us, bar possibly James, sort of wrote Stevenage off a little bit in our predictions podcast a few weeks ago, and they've been going from strength to strength since then. You think if either of the two teams are going to drop off at the minute based on form, it looks a bit more like it would be Leyton Orient. So they're not running away with it. And like you say, it was an entertaining 0-0, but when you're top of the league playing second, that's where you consolidate that lead at the top. And then again, to go away to Northampton and to lose there, it's just, it's not going as well as it could be.
It's not ideal, is it? But it's by no means
But I do think they'll reinforce. I don't think it'll be exactly the same starting 11 come the end of January. And hopefully it's nothing serious for Daniel Happe as well, because him and Beckles at the back have been so imperious, and it would be a shame to see them split up for one reason or another.
Yeah, it would. That goal they conceded to Northampton, by the way, from Ben Fox, which has helped strengthen Northampton's own automatic aspirations, by the way. Only the 13th league goal they conceded this season. Really impressive defensive record for Orient, who still hold a good position, certainly in terms of getting automatic promotion, but they've got Stevenage right on their tail now as well. That is going to wrap up this episode for this week. We hope you have enjoyed this little overview of the festive period. We've not gone through every club, we just don't frankly have the time, but over the whole season we do make sure to give love to all the 48 teams in these two brilliant divisions, and we'll be sure to do that next week as well. Boys, thank you very much for your contributions to this episode. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Val. It's been a good one.
Thank you. Yeah, good to be back.
I hope you enjoy your 2023 and have a much better time than I did on New Year's Day. But I really hope that's not a sign of what's coming and it's just a blip. But we'll just have to find out as time goes on. Join us again next week for more from the world's best third and fourth tiers. We'll see you then. Goodbye.